I'm not sure, but I think you've done a meme before, right?
I might have done one or two. Yes.
Yeah, do you know
Yeah.
what is it?
Everyone was like, "Cool story, bro. Let me let me know when you get users." It's like literally a waste of time. This is one of those things that I like really want to do, but it's just kind of like not the top thing.
If you want to support the show, head to Zora and collect one or many of our cocktail stickers. We're planning a few cool things with these stickers. For example, a leaderboard based on what you own and specific merch you can get. We love cocktails, we love stickers, so collect your stickers and cheers. I'm impressed by the meme game, but I think you've heard that before.
Yeah, it's so funny because a lot of people don't even know about Fabric. They just think of me as the meme guy.
It's so great though, because everyone has like their little niche on the
Hmm.
app, and you have to be known for this one thing.
Yeah.
Like, like really, like this personal branding is so valuable.
Yeah, I think so too. I also like that the way to be successful on the internet is to be nice to people, share your work, and have fun. And I think that memes are just a way to keep it light and to have fun and not take yourself too seriously. It's a way of poking fun at yourself, poking fun at your friends, poking fun at others. And I think it's just like, especially as a founder and with a lot of other founders, you can just get stuck in this trap of just everything is so serious all the time. And I think like I think the memes, like in some ways it's like founder therapy. Like it helps keep things light and fun. So I'm with you. I think it's a good, it's like a, it's also, it also doesn't, it keeps me from becoming too much of a shill and just like talking about my company all the time, which is part of the job, but gets a little monotonous and boring, I think, for people, including myself. So it's nice to kind of break it up and just have fun and laugh.
Absolutely. You know what? One of the things that why I recognize you so well is your PFP, which is Adam Smith, right?
Yes, it is
and
actually.
and I
I
was
think
like
that,
wondering, yeah, the book. Yes, that was
yeah,
the question actually. like, and I also was about the name of the Nonlinear.
yeah.
So about the background, like, why did you pick it? Like, is it like because of his writing or because of this book? Or
It's
both?
both. Yeah. So uh, I always kind of thought that having like a big social media profile was kind of cringe. And so my background's in product design. So I didn't really spend, I've always been behind the scenes and like my, most of my career, I was like, okay, I don't have like a big public persona, but I have a strong network of builders and founders. And I'm kind of like the first phone call when they need design work. And I liked that. When I started Fabric, I was like, okay, I actually need to step out and build, distribution channel. I need to build a public persona and build an audience. And so I was thinking a lot about like, okay, how do I want to go about that? And I think like having a super unique PFP is kind of like an important thing. Like it's like an important branding thing. And
Yeah.
so I thought a lot about like, well, what do I want the vibe to be? Like, what do I want to represent? And I wanted it to be kind of layered. And so like, obviously part of what drew me into crypto was a lot of the economics of it. I'm a really big fan of Russ Roberts and Econ Talk, the podcast. Russ Roberts wrote this book, How Adam
Yeah.
Smith Can Change Your Life. And so it just kind of captured the vibe. I was like, okay, it's Adam Smith. It's this like classical figure. Uh, but it's bright yellow. It's bitmapped. He's got a pair of like Ray-Bans on. Like it's just kind of irreverent and sort of punk. And I liked that combination of things. Like it's classic. It's like old and classic, but it feels new and fresh. And I think in a lot of ways, like crypto is a lot like that. Like I think that a lot of what we're doing is not actually fundamentally new. We're just moving value around the same that it's been moved around for, thousands
Yeah.
and thousands of years. We're just doing it in this new, interesting way. So there was a lot about that image that I remember when the book first came out. I was like, I love this. I actually was like, this would be a cool tattoo. Um, and so when I was like, okay, thinking about this persona that I wanted to build, I was like, okay, that's the image. And then Nonlinear is something I had before. Actually, that was the name of my freelance practice. So I had a small company and I did work for startups. And and so that was the name of the company, and that came from a lot of Nassim Taleb. Like, I'm a huge fan of his, and he writes a lot about how like volatility and risk, and I think working in startups, particularly being in environments that were like super high growth, I started to become fascinated with and just have an appreciation for this idea that you can have these small changes that produce like violent outcomes, like, and when I say violent, I mean like growth, like where you can be puttering along, you make some combination of changes or something happens in the market or the timing or whatever. There's like these small inputs that actually have these, massively outsized impact. And I think that goes both ways. So I think just this, I don't know, this theme, this idea of like outsized impact or outsized growth, like relative to small changes, I just find intensely fascinating. And I think that's kind of represented in this name. Also, it's a name that's available a lot. Like, it's kind of a weird math term or abstract idea. And so it's like not hard to find the name. So yeah, I just went with it. It's like, okay, well that'll be like my identity on the internet for now.
Like, you kind of mentioned, like, the like economics and like the basics of things that existed before pre-Web3, and how we just change, like, maybe how we deploy stuff. So what would be maybe the recommendations for people in this space, and especially the younger ones, maybe to familiarize themselves with, that can be helpful when you're the founder in the space, and when you talk about the concepts of the new types of economics and stuff? What would you recommend? Well, other than Adam Smith.
Yeah. It's a good question. I mean, I have this whole shelf of books. It's hard to like pick out just a few that I would like strongly recommend. I think something that I come back to over and over and over again is just like the fundamentals of like input and output, and particularly around like money in a system. So you have examples of like products, and it's like, oh, if I put some money into the system and complete XYZ task, then I might get some money back. And so, and it's like, I think there's a lot of grifters and sort of pseudo grifters in crypto that are trying to tell a story about how you can get something for nothing. And I just think like that this doesn't exist. Like, there is no such thing as alchemy. Like, so you have to understand, like, are you playing positive sum games? Are you playing zero sum games? Like, money goes into the system, money comes out of the system. What are the steps in between? Like, thinking through that very clearly and without any jargon or mumbo jumbo, like crypto babble, I think is a really powerful skill. Like, so just, that's something I look at a lot. I'm like, okay, like, you know, who's putting money in, who's taking money out, how does that happen? Very rarely, and I'd say actually actually never is there a case where there's like a magic system where you can put in less than what you take out, unless you're getting it from somebody else. So whether it's meme coins, whether it's NFT minting, anything with a bonding curve, even with Hypersub, like, there's asymmetries in the system. And so I think developing the skill of like of identifying where the asymmetries are, I think is a superpower. It's just like the ability to think critically about like a money system.
Yeah, that makes sense. Also, you mentioned you want to onboard 10 new creators by the end of On-Chain Summer. And
Yeah.
you were saying, I think it was in another piece of content, that you are planning as part of, like, I think some reformation over the next few months, which includes a rebrand to attract people from outside of Web3 as well. So will these 10 creators, because you just said about like people expect some like magic solution, or like people have this friction sometimes, do you expect some of these 10 people to be normies?
Not yet. I think we still I think probably by the end of summer, we'll be in a good place on the product side to start going and pitching to people who may be not fully in crypto, but are like crypto curious or crypto adjacent.
Yeah.
I don't think we're quite there yet. I think we need smart wallets or embedded wallets, basically where you can create a wallet with an email address or just a passkey. You don't need a seed phrase or anything like that. You don't have to install an extension. You can just create an account with an email address. I think that's kind of step one. Step two would be monthly recurring credit card payments. And I think step three is on some of the communication and messaging around what the product is, getting rid of a lot of the like, here's your transaction hash, like here's your address, here's this, here's that, like just going through the product and being like, okay, what's another way of saying this that isn't like super crypto nerd? I think doing a full pass there, so that way when we can give demos to people who are like I said, slightly outside of crypto, they could be like, okay, I get this. And then we're just pitching them on outcomes. We're saying like, look, you can make more money, you can share in the upside with the community that you build. Like, you have an audience that's yours. You own the payment rail. You have a direct economic relationship with the people that are supporting you. It's not mediated through Hypersub. You can take these people with you, anywhere that supports wallets or any system that's like looking at on-chain data can make sense. This Hypersub is like now legible to those systems. So refining that pitch, I think, like first getting the product into a good place and then refining the pitch, I think is like the focus for the next, few months. We need a lot of building though. There's a lot of building we need to get done, this summer.
Okay, cool. I'm really curious to know how big your team is and who do you have on your team?
The team is small. So it's me, my co-founder, Danny, and then we have a front-end engineer, Doug, and then we have someone helping us with design that so I did a lot of the early design, and then as we've kind of been growing more, I've brought in someone to help me. And then we have another person helping us with like marketing and BD and like writing and launching projects as well. So it's like 3 full-time, and then we have 2 part-time contractors. Cool. So I'd say the team is like, it kind of goes between 3 and 5.
Okay. Who was the first person that you hired?
Doug, our front-end engineer. So that came from, so my background's in design. Danny, my co-founder, is a really amazing engineer who gets extremely annoyed by all of the fancy front-end stuff that I want to do. He just cannot be bothered to. And so we just found ourselves like, like I'd be like, excuse me, that's off by 4 pixels. That should be 4, not 2. And he'd be like, bro, you're killing me right now. And so after that happening a few times, we were just like, we need to hire a front-end engineer. So that's why we hired Doug.
I think I know where your memes come from now.
Yeah. Yeah. So that Doug is like, he's like the middle of the Venn diagram. He's like equal parts design and engineering, and he's kept the marriage between Danny and I a happy, loving one.
I wanted to ask about the protocol that you guys built. It's called CFP, right?
Yeah.
I think it's actually a funny thing for me. Maybe I found Fabric and through some website where it was about the protocol, because we were looking at the protocols, like what are the protocols out there, and then I found Fabric, and then we came to Farcaster. I would love to talk maybe about maybe you explain like how exactly this protocol works, and as I understand, it's like an open protocol, so everyone can build it up.
Yeah. So the first protocol that we built was the Crowdfinancing Protocol, and then we built a client on top of that. So just like a very user-friendly way for interacting with the protocols, and it was all oriented around crowdfunding. So the kind of thesis of the company, why we started it, what we believe, and what we're working towards is this idea that what people on really in the world, but particularly on the internet, want to do is they want to pool capital, they want to pool resources, they want to achieve shared goals, and they want to share in the upside. Like fundamentally, that's what DAOs, I think, were about. That's what the meme stocks were about. That's what meme coins are about. I think that's a huge part of what people want to do on the internet and have been doing. I mean, if you think about Kickstarter or Patreon, a lot of these like Web2 platforms that are very constrained by the infrastructure they're built on, I think at the end of the day, this is what people want to do. And so our first attempt at meeting that need that we believe people have was with on-chain crowdfunding. And the question is like, why do it on chain? Like we already have various crowdfunding platforms. Like why do we need to do this as a protocol? And for us, it was really about the freedom to do it. A lot of the crowdfunding platforms that exist today are highly, highly permissioned. They're only available in certain regions and they're extremely constrained. And so we thought, let's build this technology. Like fundamentally, the ability to like pool capital and share upside, we just think is like, that's like baseline economic freedom. People in the world should be able to do that. And so by making it a protocol, by putting it on the EVM, now anybody can do it without asking for permission. And so the real material difference between it and any Web2 platform is that you can actually share in the upside on a pro rata basis. So in proportion to what you put in. So for example, let's say the three of us, each pooled $100. We now have $300. We use that $300 to do something, whether it's like let's say it's to like host a small event, a book reading, a poetry reading, music, whatever. And then let's say that it results in $600. Well, if we used CrowdFi to do that, then we would each put in $100 into the pool. That $100 between the three of us would each represent 33 and a third. When the $600 goes back into the pool, we can each pull out twice what we put in because it's all kind of cut up on a pro rata basis. So that was the basic idea. And we had, I'd say decent usage, especially like in and around Farcaster. Quite a few people used it. I don't know the total amount of money that was raised, but it was like, I don't know, maybe hundreds of thousands, something like that, or around there, maybe 100,000. And I think ultimately we just were like, okay, that we still have strong conviction in the thesis, but not in this particular expression of the idea. And so we were like, we need to go back to the drawing board. Like, I think crowdfunding that's not the right model. It felt like maybe it was too skeuomorphic to Web2. We just didn't feel like we got it right. And so then we went back to the drawing board. We thought a lot about NFTs. We thought a lot about recurring revenue and sustainable economic models in Web3, and started to have the idea for Hypersub. And so fast forward, 9 months, we wrote the protocol, went through audit, built the client, launched it, onboarded people, and now we're seeing quite a bit more usage. So I think in the past 6-7 months, I think creator earnings is around $700,000, $750,000, something like that. And we still see these same outcomes. So if you look at Believe in Something, Terminally on Chain, Proxy Studio, Club TED, there's a number of communities that have been building on Hypersub that have raised, tens of thousands, in some case, $100,000. And they're using the money to, share with their community some of the upside. So that's, it's similar outcomes that we're producing. It's just how we're getting there is quite a bit different.
I personally, like, when I'm thinking about the subscriptions, like me and Paul, we're creators ourselves and builders at the same time. Sorry for the noise. And like we ourselves, like, always thinking about like how can we start monetizing it, because we're creating the content for the past 2.5 or 3 years already, like for free, and we never tried to monetize it because, well, it makes sense to make the content for free if you want to reach people, right?
Yes.
And then when we think about the subscriptions, like we kind of like try to think about what could be the different models that we can apply, right? Like, okay, if people are subscribing, like what are they subscribing to? And as we were thinking about it, then we were coming to the thoughts of something that you also discussed maybe in other podcasts is like there is too many things that you're subscribing. Like, there is like a services that you're subscribing, you have people that are subscribing. And the challenges of it, like when it comes to basically your audience, right? How many things they can subscribe, which from my perspective, from one side creates maybe a competition for you, obviously, because you compete with others, like who the person is going to subscribe to. But another thing is, I'm kind of thinking about the platforms and, like the music and the movies, how in the past it was more like the individual organizations, like let's say movies, you were going to the theater, then you were buying it, and it kind of more direct to them. And when we think about now, it's about the platforms where everything is in bundle, and people rather subscribe to the platform where it's kind of like a bundle, and they're going to listen and watch whatever they want, rather than the specific movie. So I would love maybe to hear your thoughts in this direction. You're, I think, the best positions to maybe analyze it and see what are the trends and patterns that arise and what are the challenges.
I think about this a lot. Like, what is the canonical unit? Like, what is the thing you're subscribing to?
Yeah.
And on Hypersub today, it's the individual creator, the artist, the musician, the podcast, the community, whatever. It's like this one thing. And so you could say that it's unbundled, right? Whereas like in YouTube or whatever, Spotify, like you have your platform subscription, and then they've bundled up all this media, and they say that you can subscribe to this creator, but you're not really subscribed to them. I think they psyop creators into believing that, oh, here's your subscribers. They're not your subscribers. They're the platform subscribers. Because they handle the payment rail, they owned the communication,
Data.
like they own all the data. They give you what they only give, like they let you have data. It's not your data. And I think that's like exactly wrong. I think it should be the inverse. I think that the data should be owned by the creator. They should have the economic relationship. They should own that payment rail. And then they will say to the platform, I will use you for these specific things. And if at any point I wish to leave, I can. That's what the primitive, like that's what the Hypersub primitive enables, that NFT, like this, open substrate where it's like, that's your NFT, you're the owner. The people that are paying into that's all on chain. You can take that with you wherever you want. But it does bring up this question of bundles, because I think that we frame what we do on Hypersub as subscriptions, but they're a little different than Web3 because they're not they're not automated. The recurring payments are not automated. So sometimes people like get tripped up by that because they say, well, it's not subscription. They're like prepayments, because I mint 6 months, and then when the 6 months passes, I have to go back and mint 6 more months. And I'm like, well, it's subscription in the sense that money continues to flow into the contract. So it is recurring revenue, but it's manual. You have to like manually go and put the money back in. So from the creator's perspective, they're getting money every month, from a lot of people. So it's absolutely like subscription revenue. But from the end user's perspective, they're having to kind of manually go and top up. So it doesn't feel quite the same, which for a long time we were like, oh, that's a bad thing. We need to automate this. And we've added hooks in V2 to where we can automate it. But the more people I talk to, the more that I wonder, is that a bug, not a feature? Because I think a lot of people feel that there's a little bit of a grift with Web2 subscriptions wherein they set and forget. And they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I've spent all this money. Like, I actually don't like that. And so I do wonder if end users might prefer prepayments. And so I guess that's kind of this like subscription piece, and how it's like there's like this nuanced difference with how it works in Web3, certainly on Hypersub. But yeah, this question of like bundles, like what is the thing that I pay for? I think that for really diehard fans, I think Patreon has kind of proven to the world that like, yes, there is absolutely a big market for individual creators to build their own audience of people who like want just their work and who like don't want it bundled. But I think that record labels, movie studios, podcast networks, they have also proven that there is a lot of value to bundling. And so I think both will exist. And I'm actually supportive of both. What I find to be the most exciting, though, is that creators can actually start to do this themselves because the data is all open, because the data is all on chain. So what I mean is you could have Alice podcast and Bob podcast, and they each have their own audience. But let's say that they're adjacent to each other, right? So they're both maybe oriented towards Web3 founders, but one of them is whatever, like really long format, the other one's really short format. Well, it stands to reason that there's probably a lot of overlap in interests amongst their audience. Like if you like Alice, you'll probably like Bob. And because they have a differentiated enough offering, it also stands to reason that people would want both. Yes, they want to hear a long form, 3 or 4 hour in-depth podcast, but they also want these like short clips as well. That's like has a very different vibe. So why can't Alice and Bob each reciprocate and give each other give each other's audiences discounts to their own subscriptions? They can. So they can like permissionlessly just bundle together. And we're actually already seeing this happen on Hypersub, where you're seeing like creators collaborate with each other and then offering each other's subscriber bases discounts, perks, benefits, etc. So to me, this sort of represents like the frontier of Web3, which is like that's like a net new behavior that you don't really see in Web2 from the economic perspective. Like you see creator collabs all the time. It's like mutually beneficial for people to get exposure to each other's audiences, but you don't really ever see it at the payment layer. And so I'm like really excited about that. And I think there's a big opportunity for Hypersub to like facilitate more of that. So what I like to call it is like Hypersub is a network of networks. So you have like these two different creators, they're each building their own audience. That audience is itself a network. What can we be doing to help these networks interact with each other and exchange value? To me, this is like I said, this is like a new frontier of behavior that I'm very excited about. So yeah, I think will we have bundles or will everything be unbundled? I think it's probably both.
Where was the point where single or like people like creators, just the creators themselves, or maybe the face of the brand, because in the end there's a whole team behind them, but when did they become the platform themselves? And the moment that they became the platform themselves was also the moment when there was a demand for like services, products, everything around this person. So creating this whole economy. And I love the idea of like, well, cooperating with each other and actually maybe providing benefits to each other's communities if there's a relationship,
Yep.
if there's a friendship, if there's an overlap in themes, genres, whatever. And in terms of the growth around the creator and like the network effects you can create by collaborating with other people, there's also a chance to actually create network effects by creating certain incentives for your community. I think Taco had a good point about that.
Well, yeah, like I was thinking about how Hypersub itself kind of can become the platform that creates the network effect if, especially if the other clients are building it, and then just because everyone is using the same ecosystem, like infrastructure, it itself creates its own graph, like
Yep.
of subscribers, and I think like it's something that personally for us interesting because this is the direction that we are building, but also like the maybe analytics of the subscribers. I don't know if it's a direction Hypersub is taking, but yeah, like there is a subscriber, and it's recurrent subscriber. Maybe like they're committing on whatever the 6 months, for instance, every 6 months. Is there like a further analytics of these data, like who are those people, and so on?
Yep. this is something that we want to build, or, integrate something that somebody else has built. There's some independent like freelancers that you can pay to do this, to kind of find out like, okay, who are these people? Like, what have they done on chain in the last 90 days? What tokens do they hold? What have they bought? What have they sold? What NFTs do they have? Like, what attestations might they have put on chain? Like, there's all of this is open. And so I think a huge part of like building a company is focus, and focus means saying no to the things that you really want to do. This is one of those things that I like really want to do, and I think would be hugely valuable, but it's just kind of like not the top thing. So I know that there's other companies that are kind of like building in this orbit, and at some point I would love if there was like, I don't know, an API or some service that we could like integrate to show this. I think it'd be super powerful. I also think it'd be valuable from the end user's perspective. So like you subscribe to Alice, and then we show you immediately after you do that, hey, there's Bob and Charlie that do a very similar sort of thing. Maybe you want to participate in that. Similarly, we could say to Alice, hey, this user who you just got, or maybe who you could get, maybe you want to incentivize them, maybe you want to give them some discounts or something like that, because they're already part of these other communities. Like, the exciting thing to me is that we can do that, but so can anybody else, because the data is on chain. And to me, that like removes the limiting factor. So like with any big platform, you can only do what that platform ships. Like, for example, Patreon, right? You can only do what Patreon lets you do. Why? Because the data is all siloed in Patreon's walled garden. So you might say, hey, I want to do events. I want to host a series of IRL events that are very intimate, with the community of folks that are supporting me in my creative work. And they will say, well, we don't have an events feature yet. We don't have an events product. And so you're like, okay, no worries. Just give me the data and I'll go over to some events platform. And they go, no, we're not going to give you that. That's ours, not yours. And so now the event doesn't happen. With, building on chain is this open substrate where all the data goes. So now some other events platform could say, look at this. There's all this amazing, supporter data, subscriber data on chain. We can build a set of features that allows a Hypersub creator to host a really intimate IRL event. And that's a value add to us, and it's a value add to the creator. And now that's a new experience that can happen because we're not limiting, we're not this constraint on the innovation that can occur. So like, I don't know how I got started talking about this, but I think that's like something I'm really excited about as far as like net new experiences. Oh, network effects. The other thing is that like what I'm really excited about, and I'm very hopeful for V2 because we've radically changed the fee structure, is that other systems start to use STP, which is the protocol that we built to power Hypersub, that they use that to power subscriptions on their side. And then we index each other's deployments. So to give you an example, a writer could go to Paragraph, they deploy their subscription on Paragraph. That's actually an STP contract. We index that on Hypersub. So Alice launches her writing publication on Paragraph, but then for free gets distribution on Hypersub. Because again, we're all looking at that, we're all using the same computational substrate. So we can see that Alice did that. And then the inverse is also true. When someone comes and launches, their podcast subscription on Hypersub, Paragraph could see that, index that, and then show it in Paragraph and say, hey, come, and any writing that you want to do about your podcast, you can do it right here because all your subscribers are here. And they could say, and people could subscribe directly from Paragraph. And if the economics are right, where everybody's getting paid, they're getting essentially compensated for the distribution that they're creating. I think that's like a virtuous cycle. So I think that the opportunity to create like really, really powerful network effects exists, but you have to get the incentives right. You have to get like the fee structure right. You got to get all this stuff right. it's like we were talking about with like nonlinearity. It's like small changes, I think, like can have an outsized impact. I think for V1, we didn't get it right. A lot of the people we talked to, they were like, nope, your fees make basically no sense to us, and we're not going to use this. We spent a lot of time talking to developers about the ideas for the V2 fee structure. And I think in the vast majority of cases, people were like, yes, this is good. I like this, and I could see adopting this. And so our thesis, our hope is that that'll work and that'll start to drive these kind of like network effects. And then that acts as a kind of, marketing and value proposition to some of these sort of like adjacent creators that maybe not fully embedded in Web3. They're open to it, and we can say, okay, direct economic relationship, you own the payment rail, et cetera, but then also being able to say, look, you're just going to get more distribution because when you deploy here, it's going to show up everywhere. I think that's, if we can get it right, I think it becomes a very, very powerful kind of pitch.
It's like, basically, how did we come across the protocol? Because we were looking for something like, we are in this area of community, like a community graph, like building the community graph and not the social graph. Like when you have your community, and the question was like, but where does it start? Mm-hmm. So what's the starting point of it? And yeah, like we were talking about NFTs and like, the examples from the past few years, and then we come across this protocol. One of the questions actually that I had while we were talking is, what is maybe the experience and maybe the expectations from the developers to integrate Hypersub's protocol like into their whatever they're building?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is fees. So for V1, we thought that the comp was Patreon. So we're like, well, what does Patreon charge? They charge between 8 and 15%. Great, we'll charge 4%. That's half of the least amount that they'll charge you. And because we're, a venture-backed business and this is a scale game. So in order to make money, we need a lot of scale. So the 4% is fine. As we started talking to developers, we realized, the comp is actually not Patreon. The comp is Stripe. Like STP, the protocol, is fundamentally a payment rail. It's an on-chain payment rail. Hypersub is a client on top of that. It's a creator-focused client. So those things were being conflated. Like our thinking wasn't clear. It wasn't clear enough. And that was represented in this kind of confusing fee structure. For V2, we realized, okay, well, what does Stripe charge? They charge just under 3%. Okay, we'll charge 1%. So the fee structure for STP is that it just takes 1% of all the money that it moves. And then there's a configurable client fee. So any developer can tack on whatever they want to. So you have like, platform A, B, and C. Platform A might be focused on writing. Platform B might be focused on podcasts. Platform C might be focused on visual art or community building or whatever. They might have different levels of distribution. Their products might be, have different levels of maturity. It's up to the developer to charge whatever they think they can charge. I think that flexibility from the developer's perspective is super important. I think what every developer wants is to be the master of their own destiny. They don't want to be told what to do. They don't want to be in a low leverage position of asking people to make changes. So for example, you asked early on, what infrastructure do we use? And I was like, well, we built a lot of our own stuff. People will ask us, why did you do that? Like, why did you guys build your own indexer? That's a lot of work. And we're like, well, because there's things that we need that nobody else has. And if we used somebody else's, now we're in the low leverage position of having to ask them to make changes. We're saying, hey, we really need these features. Can you please add them? And then our ability to innovate is now constrained on some other third party supporting, essentially meeting our needs. When you say, fuck it, we're going to just build it ourselves. Yes, that's a lot of hard work, but at least now you are in control of your own destiny. And I think that's what every developer wants. And so thinking through that at the payment layer is like, okay, how do we incentivize the adoption of this? It's just like make it as flexible and as configurable as possible, make it as cheap as possible, and don't have an opinion on their economics. So that's why we're like, the fee is configurable. You could charge 0 or you could charge 10%. It's up to you. We're not going to be prescriptive there. I would say I think that we've made a big step forward. I still think there's probably more that we could do to incentivize developers, but I think that's a big one. I think distribution is the other one. I think every developer wants distribution. That's, I think, been a big reason why Farcaster has grown as much as it has, as fast as it has, is because it's really helped drive distribution to like various products and services. And I think if we're to get widespread adoption, it will likely be because we're able to do that as well. It's that when a developer is like, oh, when I build an STP, I get instant inventory. You know, I have like hundreds of creators by default, just by virtue of the fact that I'm building on this protocol. I think that's like a very powerful set of primitives that you get. It's like, number one, you can decide your own economics, and number two, you have immediate inventory. There's not a lot of developer products that can offer that, you know?
It's really interesting. Have you done any other things in terms of attracting developers? Like, well, typically we see a lot of hackathons and incentives, like grants be given away from projects. Any of that?
No, nothing. It's all totally organic. We haven't paid anyone to build on it or done any hackathons. My feeling on this is that no one cares about your protocol. No one cares about your infrastructure until you demonstrate that it has demand in the market. So there were a lot of people that I reached out to actually before we launched Hypersub, and I was like, hey, we just built this new primitive. They're temporal NFTs. The time is all on chain. And everyone was like, cool story, bro. Let me know when you get users. Like, just no one care. It's like literally a waste of time. And then I think what we've seen happen is like, okay, as we've demonstrated real world performance, as we've onboarded creators, as we've really like proven the value, and now that we start having a little bit of distribution, developers are like, okay, actually, I do want to build on this because I get a lot of stuff that I wouldn't otherwise get. Yeah. And I think that's the name of the game. Like Dan Romero says this for Farcaster all the time. He's like, you know, the thing that we have to provide developers is daily active users. The more of them we have, the more developers will want to build on this protocol. And I think that's not specific to Farcaster. I think that's probably true for all protocols. Like, why did iPhone, you know, why did Apple get a lot of iOS developers? Because there were a lot of iOS users. Trying to kickstart that, I mean, it's very much a chicken and egg problem, and it's very hard to get right. And I think when it does happen, like when companies do get it right, it's like a combination of things in their control and out of their control. And it's like this, it's trying to get like lightning in a bottle. Like, people ask us, how did you do this? And I'm like, I don't really know. It's hard to replicate.
Yeah. I was about chicken and egg. Who was the first creator that you onboarded? And how did you onboard them? Did you provide a guide or like provided them certain like use cases of what they could build?
Are they still on Hypersub?
Oh,
yeah, it's a good question. So this is a funny story. So we built it, right? We built the first version. It was like live. It was pretty much ready to go. And we talked to some folks, and we knew that the use case we wanted to focus on were art subscriptions. So you subscribe to artists, you get airdrops, you get entered into a monthly raffle for a 1-of-1. You get a subscriber edition, group chat access, discounts. There's like a whole suite of offerings that we thought were perfect for artists. And talked to some folks, and basically they were like, look, you have to make sure to go up market. You know, get the most prestigious artists that you can possibly find, because if you go down market, then like it's much harder to go up market when you start at the bottom than it is to go down market when you start at the top. And we're like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. So we spent a lot of time talking to very high status, successful artists, and universally, they all basically said the same thing, which is they were like, who else is using this? And we're like, well, nobody. We haven't launched it yet. And they're like, okay, well, let me know when you find people that have used it. And it was what I call like sideline sitters, like people who just want to sit on the sidelines. They don't want to take any risk at all. And they want to see who else is doing this. And because the name of the game for artists, for visual artists especially, is status. And so if there's other artists that are bigger than them that are using it, then they'll be like, yes, I want to use it too, because I want to have the association with those other high status people. That will confer status on me. But if you have low status people using it, then I don't want to. The inverse is also true. I don't want my status to go down because I'm like over on this product that, you know, doesn't have a bunch of impressive people. And so I think we spent maybe 3 or 4 weeks playing this game, like talking to a lot of people, trying to line stuff up. And I was so disgusted with this process and so just like pissed. And I think the thing that really bothered me is I was like, making art is all about taking risk. It's about expressing something that you believe. And I think what I got so frustrated by is I'm like, all of these people who are supposedly like risk takers, they don't want to take any risk. And so I was just like, you know, like I had this like bolt of clarity because I was like beside myself. I think the cardinal sin of software development is building something that nobody uses. And I felt like we were deep, you know, like in that space of just like, fuck, we can't get anybody to use it. And so I had this moment of clarity where I was like, oh, I've been looking out and instead should have been looking in this whole time. I have this incredible community of artists and builders in Farcaster. And so I need to go to them. And so I literally called up Oxen and I like on like a Tuesday night and I was like, we built this thing. Here's what it is. In fact, some of the very early conversations we've had with you when we were building crowdfunding inspired this. Do you want to be the first creator to launch it? And he was like, yes. And I was like, great. When can you do it? And he was like, tomorrow. and so we were like, hell yeah, let's go. Let's do this. Like, fuck this status game. Let's just build. Let's just get out there and iterate. And so I think it was a day or two later, he launched Salon Oxen. We got featured in On-Chain Daily. There was a little bit of interest. People in Farcaster were very supportive. And then it kind of bumbled along for like a month or two. And then it was a Saturday in February where everything just started popping off. Like it was just like he was getting subscription mints in every single block all day long for like 15 hours. And it continued through to Sunday. And we were like, okay, there's like something really here. And so I started just shouting from the rooftops, like all day, every day, like, this is what's happening. This is how much money is being made. These are the people that are subscribing. And I think that started to attract other people, first within Farcaster, but then outside of Farcaster. And then it started to kind of spread. And I've always been kind of just like a very punk, like DIY, like focused person. Just like, don't ask for permission, do it yourself. Like, don't wait around, just go. And this was very much like a confirmation of that approach, which is just like, fuck these status games. Don't try to impress people. Just do it yourself with the people in your own community and like come what may. And so, yeah, Oxen is still on Hypersub. He's still our most successful creator. He's made more money than anybody else. He has more subscribers than anybody else. And many of the artists using Hypersub model their offering after his. And so I am eternally grateful for him. I think that he to me represents like the like spirit of a true artist, which is he's a risk taker. He doesn't care about status. He's willing to experiment and try new things. And that has led the way for many other people.
I think, like, at least my experience on Farcaster and the bubble that I exist on Farcaster, on Warpcast, it's kind of like the people who are very much like experimentators and trying to try new things and kind of like more open to like the risks. And I'm wondering like if through your experience, like, working with creators, like what are the innovations on type of like the models that they're offering to their creators you kind of noticed, or like see like something that is kind of different maybe from even Web 2?
The biggest thing I'd say is rev share. The idea that you can cut in supporters into your upside, I think, is really big. I think too, the fact that referrals are percentage based is another really big thing. Like the way referrals typically work in Web 2 is like, refer your friend and we'll give them $10 off and we'll give you $10. But like if that friend ended up making like a multi-$1,000 purchase, then $10 really doesn't feel like it represents or captures the value of the referral that you drove. On Hypersub, because it's all percentage based, you're actually, I think, being fairly compensated for the value that you drive. And so that's different and has, I think, led to a lot more people sharing more. But then the fact that creators can basically, cut in the early subscribers. So they could say the earlier you subscribe, the longer period of time you subscribe for, the more of my revenue you're going to get. That's a net new thing. So that it's been interesting to see creators play with that. Some have zero, rev share. Some have 50%. I think that's been fascinating. I think time-based raffles is also really interesting. Like the idea that you could say, I'm going to enter you into only people who have subscribed for more than 6 months are going to get entered into this raffle for, say, a physical print. Or they'll say you're going to get an entry for every month that you're subscribed. So the probability of winning is greater the longer that you've been subscribed. In V2, we're introducing for reward pools, they can accept deposits from external sources. So today, the only way for money to flow into the reward pool is through subscription payments. In V2, that reward pool can accept deposits from anywhere, like Sound.xyz, Pod, Zora, a multi-sig, a DAO contract, whatever. And so you can imagine, say, a musician, and they're like, oh, I want to have merch sales, ticket sales, mints on other platforms. I want a percentage of that to all flow back into the reward pool. I want to cut my subscribers into my upside, not just on Hypersub, but all over the internet. That's like really exciting to me, So like, I think more of that. I think my mental model is that the Web2 creator thinks about revenue, particularly their own revenue, whereas I think the Web3 creator is thinking more about GDP. How do we all win together? Like many creators, they wouldn't be where they are without the people who supported them early. And so I think this idea that the value can flow bidirectionally, it can go back and forth, I think is very, very powerful. And I think it's a huge unexplored design space that I'm like the most excited about and also very curious. Like, am I right? Are we seeing the world clearly? I think we are, but let's see.
I was thinking about about the mutually rewarding relationships. I was thinking about, but it's a little bit different. It's kind of like the concept of the fan tokens and how tokens could be created from another side and how it could be, the economy around it could be created. I'm still thinking about it. I wouldn't say that I have a very strong opinion about it, but I don't know if you thought about something like that ever.
Yeah, I know there's like different, like I think social tokens, there's a lot of promise there. I think that, I didn't see like a breakout use case or a product or experience that delivered on that promise. And I feel like I kind of see something similar with these like different points systems that are emerging or tokens where I'm like, it's interesting, but I think at the end of the day, people don't want these derivatives. They just want the real thing, like a funny story is like, hiring strategies. So, my background's in tech and it's like, and like I lived and worked in Silicon Valley. And I always thought it was interesting how the different strategies between, say, like Netflix and Google, like Google gives you all kinds of perks. It's like a country club. Like they get, you can like get your dry cleaning and a haircut and ping pong and free food and all this stuff. Whereas, like, I don't know if this is true anymore, but certainly at the time, Netflix was like, we're not giving you any of that. We're just going to give you more money. And I think like that's actually extremely compelling. It's just like, we're not going to like points and rewards and all this other stuff. Like, I think at the end of the day, people want ETH, they want actual just money. uh, and so I'm more bullish on that. Like, I'm more bullish on like, how can creators who are earning revenue, real revenue, like how can they just share that with their supporters? I think that's what people actually want, is revenue, money, not these sort of, derivatives of money that it's like, oh, well, if you jump through all these hoops and you get these kind of synthetic things and maybe those are redeemable, but at some ratio. And it's just like too galaxy brain. I feel like the smooth brain thing is just like, I subscribe, I get money, period.
It's a entirely different use case. But like I was thinking of Taylor Swift and all these like perks that she's offering to her Swifties, like being part of this like early supporters or like close supporters group where you can like pre-listen like to music before she releases it. Now she's offering a lot of stuff to her supporters that are not like necessarily making them money, but it's more about the status. Like being part of this small group of people, I think, well, a lot of people would pay a huge amount of money to be in that group. So I think, in my opinion, there might be a demand for some of these things, but it might be a completely different use case in terms of the size of the creator, how established are they, like, do they require subscription to survive?
Yeah,
Probably
yeah.
it isn't. So that's a different question.
Totally. Like, I think that perks, access, benefits, all of that is extremely valuable. And there's absolutely like a use case and I think real demand for that. I think when you start to factor in like economic tools like points or rewards or, rev share or stuff, I think with that category of perks, I think it really just comes down to like, just get like, let's not play games. Like, just give me money. Like, give me actual real value. If that's part of what's being offered, so for example, if I'm like, okay, I'm going to give you discounts and early access, and this like set of perks, it's like, okay, cool, that's great, I want that. And then if you say, and I'm going to give you this, I'm going to give you 1,000 points, it's like, well, what is that? It's like, well, and then there's these, I don't know, like I there's a couple different companies that are like working in this orbit, and I just say I'm like, I don't think I'm yet convinced that people actually want that, like, no, but look at credit cards, right? Credit cards have been doing this for many years. So there's like these points games with credit cards. There's also a lot of credit cards that just give you cash back. That's it. It's very simple. It's like at the end of the month, you're going to get 2%, 3%, 4%, just straight up cash back. So functionally, all of the purchases you make with this card act as a discount. I think when you get really complicated, it's like, well, you get 1,000 Sky Miles. It's like, okay, well, what's the exchange rate between Sky Miles and like dollars? It's like, well, it changes. It's like, okay, I think you kind of lose people.
So I wanted to ask you initially about the strategy you applied on the memes channel with subscription NFTs on this channel. But then I was also thinking about, well, all the other ways that creators are making money indirectly from their fans, which is something we're really talking about a lot, is remixing content and like how fans are essentially creating network effects by remixing content. Just has to be like one video that goes viral and then you have a million remixes. No one actually is able to trace where it came from, at least not at the beginning. And then someone makes, like, people make a lot of money based on this one video. They get loads of visibility. And I think this whole space is super interesting for what's the potential in the future of sharing revenue based on remixes in general. Like,
Yeah.
do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I mean, this is not really the space that we're in, but a friend of mine, Soren from Titles, is thinking a lot about this and about this idea that you can take a canonical body of work, you can, use that to create a new model, like an AI model, and then that AI model is used to generate these derivatives. But because it all happens on chain, you kind of have attribution. and you can drive value accordingly. And I find it fascinating. And I think about this a lot with memes, like, because I'm posting memes all the time, I'm modifying memes. And it's funny because you can see, it's almost like, what's the name of the mosque? Is it Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, where it's like, this was like when the Muslims had control, and then the Christians came in, and then they changed it all, and then the Muslims got control again, and the Christians got control again. And there's like just these layers of like the mosque where you're like, okay, you know, it's like rings on a tree or something. And you see this with memes, you know, where you're like,
Yeah.
this meme is like was a meme built on this other meme, but then that itself was like built on this other, and you can kind of trace it all the way back. And I always like wonder, it's like these layers of creativity and intellectual property. And so it's like, how do you, who created this? You know, who should capture the value of this? And it's like, in this perfect world, it's like the value would accrue proportionally to everybody who contributed to like the stages of this meme. And I think that if you have a closed system, that works. I think the problem is that the internet is not a closed system. It's a super noisy, diffused, chaotic, open system. And so I think that harnessing that creativity in like one protocol is very difficult. An example of this would be a video gets shared on TikTok. It gets screen recorded and modified and then shared on Instagram. It gets screen recorded and modified again and gets shared on YouTube, and then again, and it just bounces around. And every time it bounces around, it like kind of permutates and just becomes this like new thing. And I like that. I think that's what makes the internet such a fun place, is that there is just this like unbounded creativity and remixing. And so though I'm optimistic and excited about protocols that are trying to kind of capture this, I think I don't know that it can be captured. You know, I think the internet is just a chaotic place, and like memes represent that.
Yeah. If there's anything out there that will be able to capture that, it needs to be so invisible that,
Yes.
well, it doesn't hold anyone back from actually repurposing the content that they find in
Yeah.
any corner of the internet.
Like exactly like your competition is taking a screenshot.
Yeah.
Good luck with that. You know, like that's the fastest, you know, you're like, oh, that's funny. Screenshot, you just use, you know, whatever photo app to like add a piece of text or remove something or crop it in some way. You have this immediate direct manipulation happens on device. You don't have to create an account. You don't have to learn how to use any new tools. I think like, I agree it needs to be invisible. And like, I don't even know if that's a solvable problem. It might be, but you may have to, that technology may need to be embedded in the operating system itself.
I had another question before I went into a completely different direction.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about you as a founder, you as a influencer as well on Webcast, and the status that and the trust that you build over time as a founder. And you were saying that you onboarded your first artist, Oxen, and he was immediately like sold. He agreed to do it. How much of that, like, do you think is due to your presence as a founder and like the trust you earned over time in this community?
100% of it. Yeah. I think it's all the reputation that you build. Like, I think Zero X Designer has this great cast. He says, if you want to get ahead, help other people. And I think that's the secret to success on the internet, is like, if you want to win, you have to help other people win. And I think showing up on Farcaster every day, interacting with people, posting memes, sharing what we're building, what we're doing in our channel, that's all trust building. It's reputation building. Doing what you say you're going to do consistently over time, listening to people, their feedback, responding, all of this. Each interaction is just a tiny little deposit in the credibility bank. So that when you ask people for something, hey, will you be the first user on my product? hey, will you pay attention to what I'm doing? You know, we just launched this thing. Here's a blog post. Will you go read it? Some creator just launched a new subscription. Will you go check it out and pay for it if that's something that you're into? Those are like that's like withdrawals on the credibility bank. So you're constantly making deposits and withdrawals. The deposits are when you do work for other people, you help other people. Founder DMs you and says, hey, we're going to try to raise money. Here's our pitch deck. Can you give me feedback? Can you help with intros? Can you give me feedback on the V1 of this product, et cetera, et cetera? Every time you're like, yes, and you give a little time and attention and work to somebody else, you're making deposits. And then when you're asking that for in return, you're making withdrawals. And I think as long as there's balance there, people have an intuitive sense of that. They generally will reject people who want to take more than they give. I just don't think that they last very long, and eventually they'll just churn out because they get ignored. I think wherever you commit to as a founder, you should commit to some place where you're doing that, whether that's a group chat on Telegram, a community in Discord, Farcaster, Twitter, Lens, whatever. Like, pick a place, pick a lane, and give more than you take. That's, I think, would be like my advice to any founder. Wherever you pick, you should vibe with, you know, like pick a place where you feel like you can be yourself. We feel like you can be authentic. Everyone can feel it when you're not. It sounds like a weird, wishy-washy thing, but I really think it's true. Like, who you are, it comes through on the internet. It comes through in your interactions with people, and people have a sense for it. So just like pick a place where you feel like you can be authentically yourself. That would be that's what I've done. It's worked for me. And, you know, I think that I'm generally suspicious of advice that is like, has not been repeated and is also like an artifact of the time. So a huge reason why I've had success on Farcaster is just because of when I joined and that I was consistent. And so, like, to be honest, if I were to start from scratch today, I do not believe that I'd be able to replicate the success that I've had, because it would be happening at a different moment in time, and the dynamics of the network have like radically changed since then. But I will say that I still think I'd be able to build enough of a community. And I've seen people do that, like in the past 6 months, people that joined with 0 followers and now have thousands, and a very engaged and active community. So I think it's still possible. I just think that the scale that it's possible at is probably time dependent, you know. But at the same time, I've been doing this now for over 2 years, and so I think, where will the people who started 6 months ago be in 2 years? So, you know, there's no free lunch, you know. It's hard work no matter what. Like when people go, oh, I launched a Hypersub and I didn't make 10 ETH in a week. I'm like, that's right. And you're not going to, like, you know, it's not going to happen on Hypersub. It's not going to happen anywhere, you know, like creating value and finding success. It just takes time, and it's hard work no matter where you are. So like, pick a place where the odds are in your favor and the economics are in your favor, but don't forget about the fact that, like, building valuable things takes time.
That was the perfect note to end on, that I will definitely come back to as I'm building like my personal brand on Farcaster as well. What's your go-to drink for on-chain summer?
I've been drinking a lot of Spindrift lately. It's like a growing beverage in the US. It's just carbonated water and fruit juice, like lemon or grapefruit or orange or whatever. And I felt like last year everyone was like drinking LaCroix, or the past few years, like a lot of LaCroix. This year is a lot of Spindrift. For alcoholic drinks, I just like a good Corona, just a simple Mexican beer. It's like pretty basic, but timeless and delicious. So those are my alcoholic and non-alcoholic choices.
Is it spicy?
Okay.
Yeah, I like spicy stuff, but not really like spicy drinks. You know what? I do like mezcal. I'll drink mezcal or like a mezcal mule. Yeah, I'm a fan. I do like a good, like a really kind of like a mezcal that's got like a good kick to it, is like a fun drink.
I love ginger beer, and it's It's an amazing mix with mezcal as well.
Yep.
It's really, really good.
If the ginger is like, if it's like real ginger and not overly sweetened, but kind of like a dry, like really like almost like a spicy like ginger with mezcal, you know, it's like,
It's like a ginger shot with like a bubbly ginger shot, basically.
yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's a good drink. That's like a really nice, like you can like nurse that and it's like fun to drink that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's probably not, I mean, it has some healthy components as well.
I'll tell myself that. Yeah. Really enjoyed the discussion. Thank you guys.
If you want to support the show, head to Zora and collect one or many of our cocktail stickers. We're planning a few cool things with these stickers. For example, a leaderboard based on what you own and specific merch you can get. We love cocktails, we love stickers, so collect your stickers and cheers.